Hey, Peppers! It's been a while since we heard that.
Yeah.
I've been in a farm. They don't even have music in farms. How's your holiday
Some
been?
music of manure being created.
That's this podcast.
Yeah.
You're on holiday too. How's it
I
been?
am on holiday, yes. I spent the first few days with my parents in Penrith. That was very nice. There is a lot to do in the lower Blue Mountains.
Yeah,
Highly recommend it.
there's nothing to do near Scone. I can tell you that.
I'm sure there is.
Well, I've been reading American politics. That's what I've been doing. Let's get right into it. COVID.
Yes.
About a week ago, I was on TV and I was talking about the fact that, the deaths still haven't gone up yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, the cases are going up. Hospitalizations are going up a little bit. Deaths, not at all. Maybe, just maybe, they've dodged this bullet. We'll find out when we come back. Well, we don't need to wait till we come back. We found out right now. They did not dodge this bullet.
They have not dodged
Not
the
in the
bullet.
slightest. Okay.
No.
Cases are now over 60,000 a day. The positive test rate is now 9.5% nationally.
Yes.
And so it's like over 25% Arizona and
Yeah.
nearly
Over
20%.
20% in Texas.
Yeah. So about 20% Florida. National hospitalizations have gone from 28K to 44K in 18 days. That's a 50% increase nationally, but we all know that this is not a national issue. This is a local issue.
Yeah.
And the national death curve has begun to go up in the last 3 days.
Yes.
But let's talk locally. Texas, as you say, is the biggest issue at the moment. Texas and Florida are competing to see who's got the biggest problems. Texas definitely has the biggest death curve in terms of their graph of deaths. They've had over 100 deaths per day for the last 2 days, and their curve's gone up quite a lot for the last few days. California also is going up quite a lot. It's a little unclear where the issue is in California because it's such a big place.
Yeah.
But there's certainly an issue somewhere.
Yes.
They've had 118, 150, 137 deaths the last 3 days. And so basically once you gain over 100 deaths even in a big state, you've got an issue.
Yeah.
Arizona's been a bit inconsistent. It goes from 0 deaths up to 117 deaths and down to 3 deaths. They clearly have a problem measuring.
Yes. Yeah.
But their 7-day trends are going up as well. Florida today had their first day over 100 deaths for the entire pandemic, 119 deaths today. In terms of hospitalizations, because this is the real issue.
Yeah.
Like when the hospitals get full, that's when you have a problem. In Florida, an article I read on my farm said, not my farm, someone's farm I was squatting at, said that the ICUs were full, not nearly full at 54 hospitals out of 300 in Florida on Tuesday, with 30 ICUs reported as more than 90% full. So
That is really worrying.
they've got a problem because obviously if there's one hospital that's full and then one next to it isn't full, you can move patients.
Yeah.
But if every hospital in a city is full, then you can't move them 3 hours or 4 hours. Well, you can, but it's a huge issue and it's a health issue as well. So they've got a real problem there. Also, I should say, while we're focused on Florida and Texas, we should just don't ignore Georgia. That's been the motto of the last 3 months. Don't forget Georgia. Georgia's always just on the cusp of becoming a big issue, and once again, they're going up as well. They seem to have a bit of an issue about mask wearing because, like in places in Florida, Texas has got mask orders now. Georgia, Atlanta's trying to have a compulsory mask order. Their mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, has COVID herself.
Yes.
And they're trying to get a compulsory mask order going, but our old friend Kemp, Governor Kemp, has outlawed all mask orders within Georgia. So there's a bit of an issue going on there. Another potential issue here is we may be dealing with a new strain. There's increasing numbers of studies suggesting this is a slightly different strain that's down the south, which is more contagious than the previous strain, but not more deadly, which would explain why it's spreading.
That would explain.
And the deaths aren't going up quite as much as they did before, even though they are definitely going up now.
Yes.
And the suggestion is that this strain, if it is a new strain, is 3 to 9 times as contagious. Do you have anything to say about numbers before we move to Trump and COVID?
I have nothing more to say about numbers.
Okay.
That is a horribly effective overview.
Okay, all right. So let's move to Trump then, because he seems to be basically ignoring this situation.
Yes.
He said about 4 days ago that he's opening up the country far faster than anybody thought even possible and more successfully.
Or advisable.
Yes. And at the same time, a White House official, not surprisingly, an anonymous White House official was telling reporters the new strategy was, quote, "The virus is with us, but we need to live with it."
Yes.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
It
Dr.
is about
Dave?
accustoming people to thinking that 1,000 deaths a day is normal, acceptable.
Which is where they're at again.
Yeah, the price that you pay for reopening the economy. So Trump is continuing to hammer on this idea that the numbers are only high because testing is high. So he continues to claim that the US is testing way more than anyone else, which is not true. The US sits at 26th in terms of number of tests conducted.
Per capita.
Yes.
I mean, he's right about raw numbers, but who cares about raw numbers?
Yeah. If we're looking at raw numbers, the US is, by far the worst in the world on just about every measure.
Yes.
In fact, you often do get this thing where he's essentially talking about, testing in terms of raw numbers, but insists on talking about deaths on a per capita basis.
Yes, that's right, yes.
Even on a per capita basis, the US is sitting at 9 in the world, and that's in a list that includes Andorra and Monaco.
Yeah.
So, but really in terms of, often countries over 1 million is the sort of threshold.
And to just give some context for people there, within 2 weeks, I reckon, maybe 3 weeks, America is on track to pass France in per capita deaths. Now, remember, France is one of those countries that shot ahead early on, and people thought America would never catch that on per capita. Once you get past France, you're talking about Spain and Italy aren't far ahead. England's still miles ahead. The UK is shooting ahead. But Spain, Italy, France, they are within America's sights. The only thing that's going to stop America ending up at the top of the per capita death leaderboard is the fact that South America is going to lap them. Brazil, Chile, and Peru. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So, and I mean, obviously this, it depends on, first of all, a determined ignorance about the rest of the world. Second, basically what Trump is doing is giving his supporters debating points for when they're talking to other people. This is what a lot of Trump's rhetoric is about, and a lot of the campaign rhetoric is about. It's to give people, this is why he's saying on Twitter today, for the 100th time, it's because of death. This is so that his supporters, when they're talking to other people, these are their debating points. Trump has always understood politics in terms of he's got to give his team something to talk to other people about. So, I mean, and that's, I won't use the term laughable because it's literally fatal in terms of the consequences of this misinformation. But, it is completely absurd, the story that Trump is spinning here. And obviously those very high positivity rates are all the proof that you need that it's not just because of increased testing that the numbers are going up. The causation goes in the other direction. But then we're having, now he's saying schools. Schools are the next battle.
Now it's all about schools.
Schools are the next battleground in this.
Should I read his tweets?
Yes.
Okay. In Germany, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and many other countries, schools are open with no problems.
Yes.
The Dems think it would be bad for them politically if US schools open before the November election, but is important for the children and families. May cut off funding if not open. Let's talk about that one before we get into the next one.
Yeah. First of all, sheer projection. This is one of the times where Trump just can't help giving the whole game away when he says, the Dems think it'll be politically good for them if schools don't reopen. No, he's literally talking about why he wants schools to reopen because this is part of the whole, we are going to normalize this entire thing. I'm going to run on the fact that I'm reopening the economy and, it's just everyone around the world's living with 1,000 deaths a day.
Yeah. Can I just point out, by the way, this is an obvious thing to do, but I like to bring the numbers to the obvious.
Yeah.
Germany, 433 cases last night. Denmark, 16 cases last night. Norway, 15 cases last night. Sweden, 58 cases last night. US, 61,607 cases last night. That is all you need to know about that particular tweet.
But another thing that is really sinister about this is this forcing schools to reopen and just doing it in the most brutal way possible. I mean, saying no, because schools, teachers who work in schools, administrators, people who are actually going to have to do this. They have been working frantically, not just in the US, everywhere, to work out ways that you can blend online learning and in-person learning, what sort of things that you'll need to do to the school day, how you rotate students, everything that you can do to make it as safe as possible. Trump's basically saying, no, none of that, just complete reopening. Now, what this is about, to get back to why this is sinister, is this is not about education. Republicans do not give a fuck about education. They've spent the last few years actively making themselves the anti-education party. This is about putting children somewhere so that parents can return to work.
Yeah, this is about opening the economy.
This is all, it's in the same vein as, no, we're not going to continue with these unemployment benefits because we need to force people back to work. And really, your most cartoonish, vulgar Marxist couldn't actually come up with a better caricature of capitalism than this, right? That it's going to be incredibly dangerous for a lot of people to return to work. We are basically going to punitively force them to return to work in order to keep the economy going, in order to try and, ensure the re-election of a right-wing president.
And to be fair, opening the economy is obviously an important thing that people want, for all kinds of reasons, leaving aside Trump's re-election, just in terms of, we've talked about the mental health issues of unemployment and all the rest, and poverty and all the rest of it. Obviously, it's important to open the economy. And also, obviously, we know that the kids don't catch COVID at the same rate as as older people. And if they do, they don't have the same kind of risk factors, etc. We know that. But in a place like Texas or Florida, like places where it's just going nuts, and places where it's not going nuts yet, but it might go nuts if you throw the switch too quickly. You don't want to do this in a stupid way. And Trump has made, the thing that gets me is not that he's trying to get the economy open. If I was president, I'd be trying to get the economy open too. The thing is, he doesn't seem to have any plan for how to do it. In fact, there is a plan. The plan has been produced by the CDC, which gets us to the next tweet, actually. Let me just read this out. I disagree with CDC on their very tough and expensive guidelines for opening schools. While they want them open, they are asking schools to do very impractical things. I will be meeting with them. And the White House has said it's going to issue new guidelines over the top of the CDC for how they should be open. So the experts have weighed in. And they're not Democrats. No. these are bureaucrats. And they have weighed in with the safest way, in their view, to reopen schools. Now, if Trump disagrees with that, that's fine. Put forth your own plan that makes sense, that isn't just schools reopen, and then we can debate that, and then we can move forward. But if you're so blatantly just trying to angle for an outcome, without considering at all the method by which you get there, that is, I agree with you. That's cartoon character stuff.
It is. And I mean, a couple more points on cartoon villain capitalism. We've got Mitch McConnell basically insisting the next stimulus will have to include something we've talked about before on this show, which is liability waivers for employers.
Which is effectively saying you are going to get sick.
We cut the uninsurance employment, and we cut liability. We give liability waivers to employers. So, yes, we are feeding you into the more. The second thing was, it's really come about that one of the most dangerous industries is meatpacking. Meatpacking plants are just particularly conducive to COVID. So there have been 30,000 cases leaked to meatpacking plants. What was the administration's response to this? To declare meat basically a matter of national security. Right. An industry that was vital to national security. There you go.
I like meat, but that's interesting.
I like meat too. I've never really thought of it as a national security issue before. By the way, I've got a stat nugget.
Oh. Really?
Yes,
really?
Hit the stat nugget.
Stats nugget.
I missed that so much. Listen to sirens. Warning, stats ahead.
Stats ahead. Okay, this stats nugget comes from the book How America Compares, which was released earlier this year. The authors are Rodney Tiffen, Ross Gittins, Brendon Brendan O'Connor, Anika Gauja, and David Smith.
Is this going on the list, Deb?
Oh, yeah.
Putting your book on the
Let's
list?
put our own book on the list.
This is always going to happen.
If you love looking at tables of comparative data
I do.
of OECD countries, you will love how America compares.
Okay.
Anyway, one of our tables was about meat consumption. Now,
Yes.
Australia and the US notably lead the world in terms of meat consumption, with New Zealand trailing close behind at third, but then there's a massive gap between us and the rest of the world. You know, come to think of it, I can't remember who was number one or number two, but Australia and the US, almost identical meat consumption.
I don't cramp your flow, but part of the reason for that
Yes.
is probably because of price. Because I could not
almost certainly.
believe how expensive a Big Mac was in Europe.
Yes,
when we
yeah.
went for the war and everything. In Switzerland, it was like $14. It was like, what the hell?
Yes.
Anyway, go on.
So I think it's the average American consumes 116 kilos of meat per year, and the average Australian consumes 115 kilos of meat. It might be the other way around. In any case,
Sure. Yes.
yeah, that's a lot of meat. Like that's more than a quarter pounder.
That's
a
a
day.
big nugget.
That is indeed a big nugget. As I said, New Zealand's pretty close behind. Then I think Canada is number 4.
Sure.
You might be seeing some common themes here.
Sure.
So anyway, I just wanted to throw that nugget out there
To promote your book.
However, yes, to promote my book. However, this does not make meat a national security
It does not.
issue.
It definitely does
In
not.
fact, eating less meat is probably, from a national security point of view, one of the things we'll have to learn to do in coming years.
Well, climate change type stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I should say, by the way, when we're talking about, just before we move off to schools, like when we're talking
Yes.
about cartoon villains and all the rest of it, he can twirl his moustache as much as he likes, but you can't make parents send their children to school.
No, you can't.
And part of the issue he has
Yeah.
is that despite the fact the CDC have screwed up absolutely everything they have done for the last 2 months, they're really trusted. Really trusted. Like 64%, according to a Pew poll last week, trust the CDC
Yes.
for corona advice. 30% trust the White House.
Yeah.
So when the White House introduce their guidelines, it's going to get pilloried by the media for sure.
Yes.
People aren't going to listen to them.
Yeah, I mean, US is a country with a big homeschooling cult. Like 3% of children in the US are homeschooled, which might not sound like a lot, but that is actually like quite.
Yeah.
It's a significant enough segment of the population that there's this entire culture around homeschooling. There are all of these resources available for homeschooling. There are support networks available for homeschooling. A lot of it is quite religiously oriented, but not all of it. There are all kinds of alternative homeschooling movements. So if there's anywhere in the world where you're just going to opt to keep your kids at home, the US is actually probably the place to do it. Yeah.
Before I want to make a couple of random COVID points before we move on to other topics.
Yep.
A really, to me, worrying element on COVID this week was something that we've talked about, not in particular about COVID, but just in general.
Yes.
I've finally seen the fruition of this thing which we talked about, which is the information divorce, where one side has their information, the other side has their information, and they literally don't interact with each other at all.
Yes.
That's been coming for some time. I saw the first example of complete information divorce this week, to the point where I can't referee it, because normally the way I referee controversies is by reading all different sides and trying to compare and contrast. But when you have completely different sources of information on both sides, you don't know which one's right and which one's wrong, or in between. It's hard to know. And what I'm talking about is hydroxychloroquine.
Oh!
There was a study this week which Sky News went crazy about. Rowan Dean, he basically called for the closure of the ABC over this study. I mean, I know he calls for the closure of the ABC over everything, but on this particular day, it was this study, which was saying, here we finally have proof in a proper study that hydroxychloroquine reduces fatalities. This was the same day that the WHO said we're not doing anything more with hydroxychloroquine because there's just no evidence at all that it affects fatalities. Some newspapers reported the WHO. Some newspapers reported the other study. You can guess the leanings of both kinds of newspapers. Literally no overlap. The Conservatives did not acknowledge at all the WHO. The Liberals did not acknowledge at all the other study. And I'm left going, is that study legit? Is it bullshit? if you don't write about it, we don't know. And I'm still looking into it myself, but I'm finding it difficult, to be honest. It just worries me that we've entered this world now where people are only even reporting on the news, even in a critical way, about the stuff that they want to talk about and not the other stuff. So I just want to flag that. It's a worry. But yeah.
You know who's taking hydroxychloroquine now?
Bolsonaro?
Yes.
Yes.
Bolsonaro.
That was so going to happen. I can't believe
It was, this was
long.
the single most inevitable thing about the entire pandemic was that Bolsonaro would get it.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, the guy's been going around like touching people at rallies, touching his supporters to make a point.
Yeah, well, he made that point all right.
But yeah, he's taking hydroxychloroquine.
I should just say about the WHO, we're not going to go into it, but just we should say this week as well. I'm covering all the news because since we don't have a show this week.
Yes,
that Trump did give one year notice of withdrawing from the WHO this week, which means nothing because if there is a different president, that 1 year will it will not come to fruition. Joe Biden will just reverse it immediately.
Yes.
So, but if Trump wins the election, then they will withdraw halfway through next year.
Just given what you've said, I would like to make a point about science.
Yes, please.
A deep point about science, which is I do tend to follow the view that Karl Popper had about science, which is essentially nothing ever gets proved. Nothing ever gets proven. Nothing ever gets proven. Things get falsified all the time, but there's never any one final answer to anything in science.
I agree.
So there is proof in the sense of things that are mathematically true. There is proof in the sense of there is so much overwhelming evidence of something that it's generally accepted as true. But in a lot of cases, and I think hydroxychloroquine is going to be one of them, basically we're looking at weighing evidence, right? And there is going to be conflicting evidence. This is, it's the nature of science that there's always going to be conflicting evidence. What you have to do is look at the overall kind of evidentiary weight. Yes. So far, from what I can see, is that there has been evidence in favour of hydroxychloroquine. Yes. There was, that original study that kicked it all off. But so far, the evidentiary weight does seem to be against it.
Absolutely. They would need, if this study is legit, which I still don't know.
Yes, yeah.
But if this study is legit, they still need 3 or 4 legit studies further to balance out the other side.
You need to replicate it, right? Yeah. This is a key feature of good science is replication. And when you can't replicate studies, so the whole field of social psychology had this major problem a few years ago when there were meta-studies done showing that a lot of studies couldn't really be replicated. Then you do need to worry about, okay, we've got results, even if they were collected and found, analysed in the most pure, good, protocol-following, reliable ways, it still could be leading you up the garden path for any number of, possible reasons. Given that in frequentist statistics, the kind of canonical standard of we're going to accept this result, or at least we're going to reject the null hypothesis, is the 95% confidence interval.
Yep.
Right. That means, 1 in 20 times.
You're wrong.
You're wrong.
Yeah. And not to mention, it's science often over time, even something that is in inverted commas right, as you look into it more deeply, you realize it's right for a certain period of the time, but the deeper you look, the less right it becomes, relativity, etc.
So, and I mean, this is why this is one of the great things about science is it's a very social activity, right? Science is not
no one's ever said that before.
No, it is, because science is not about lone geniuses. Do it as much as we, valorize figures like Einstein or Newton or Marie Curie. It's not just about lone geniuses, out there doing their thing. It's really about the very kind of gradual accumulation of evidence and knowledge, and scientists do accept that there is never any final result.
Yeah. And while broadly what you just said is correct, even on particular studies these days, I can tell you as someone who writes sources for my stats, there are usually 10 names on any given study these days. There are no lone geniuses anymore.
No, it's quite normal to have 200 names on a paper. Anyway, so I suppose we've been doing all this deep musing on science, but this is quite useful in terms of whenever you think about scientific reporting, or reporting on tests, especially when it gets politicized.
Yeah, nothing.
Right? There's often no established authoritative right answer out there.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about COVID?
No.
Okay. All I'll say about COVID on my way out is just to note that news story, which I read so much about this week, about Alabama college students throwing a COVID party.
Not true.
Not true. Not true.
Part
Complete
of my childhood
bullshit.
just died.
Sorry about that. The sourcing is terrible. I won't go into much detail.
I'm proud to say I never clicked on one of those stories.
Yeah, well, the evidence is extremely uncompelling. They haven't spoken to anyone who can confirm it. There are no teenagers who they've quoted. It's just so thinly sourced. The vision they used in that video was from New York, not from Alabama. The whole thing's just clearly bullshit. So anyway, I just want to move on to just note that.
What do you think of the local rumour in Melbourne?
What's this one?
This is the rumour that the hotel quarantine security breach was caused by a security guard or security guards actually having sex with people who were infected with COVID.
Wow. I want to see the movie.
There is a comedian who's already made on Twitter. Yeah, like a 10-second movie version of this.
This is what Twitter's for.
Yeah.
We're about to get to the bad parts of Twitter, but that's the good parts of Twitter.
I don't know about this rumor. It just sounds like something that is people will believe it because it's funny.
Sure.
Which,
Let's get into race. There's a lot of stuff on this week on that. Let's start with Mount Rushmore because a lot of people want to talk about Mount Rushmore. In particular, Trump's speech at Mount Rushmore.
Yes.
And you're one of those people. So talk to me about it.
Okay. So this speech was pure Stephen Miller. And so Stephen Miller is...
Not abracadabra.
No. So Stephen Miller is Trump's highly influential political advisor. You'd have to say he's the most influential person in the White House apart from Trump himself.
He's just about the only one who's survived since day one.
Yes. Yeah.
Pence.
Yeah. So what really struck me listening to this speech is if someone else had made that speech, Trump wouldn't have understood a word of it. Okay. What we were talking about last week in terms of how Trump's language is changing away from his own very sort of unique, very concrete, build the wall, make America great again. He's moving into much more sort of standard right-wing culture war rhetoric.
Yes.
Now, this speech was a great example of this, right? So it had all of the greatest right-wing culture war hits. There was the mention of far-left fascism, right? Now, do you think that Trump has spent years involved in these incredibly irritating online debates about whether fascism and Nazism are actually left-wing? No, Trump hasn't ever had anything remotely to do with those debates. Does the term left ever even occur to Trump independently? Maybe a little bit more in recent years as part of a general association with enemies, but this was never even a word that he used at the beginning of his presidency or in his campaign. He could not pronounce the word totalitarianism when he was trying to talk about cancel culture being a new form of totalitarianism. That's fine. I don't think he's very familiar with that word. The problem with all of this is the group that he won at the margins last time, they don't know any of this stuff. Right? I doubt that the term cancel culture, which I know we're going to talk about more, is actually that familiar to most people. So when he talks about cancel culture is the new form of totalitarianism, that doesn't mean much to the people that he needs to win. Make America great again meant something. Build the wall means something. These terms actually don't really mean anything. It's quite clear that they don't mean a lot to Trump himself. It used to be the case that 2/3 of Americans couldn't even place themselves as either conservative or liberal. Now, and they couldn't identify which party was conservative or liberal. Now, things have changed. Americans have become a bit more ideological, but it's still like a third of the population can't place either themselves as conservative or liberal, can't identify the parties as conservative or liberal. In fact, there are a lot of people out there who are really quite right-wing, but who would say, oh, no, I'm not conservative or liberal. I don't care about either of those things. I'm just interested in the truth. That's who Trump was getting at last time.
Well, originally that was his pitch.
Yeah.
His pitch was, I'm not like those
Yes.
left-right guys. I'm just common sense.
And so there was polling that revealed he was considered the moderate in the race.
By a mile.
Yeah. People thought, he's this mix of, they might not have thought it in these terms, but it's like, here's this mix of socially conservative and economically liberal that we've been looking for. He can't sell himself as that anymore, not while he is sounding like a garbled Breitbart column. I mean, this is the thing. He's actually finally using the rhetoric that some of his right-wing cheerleaders in the media have been wanting him to use for ages. So this is why, someone like Rich Lowry was saying, oh, yes, this was his best ever. His best ever speech.
Conservative media love that speech.
When you're making the speech that Rich Lowry considers your best ever speech, you're in deep shit. Right? Because it means you are not getting at that block of people that you got at last time who were so alienated from politics that pollsters couldn't even find them.
But what about the argument to say, look, he's got no choice. He's governed from the right for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So that ship has sailed. The nonpartisan thing, that's long gone. So his only chance is to just get 100% turnout from the right.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose the other argument would be, look, he's on thin ice here, but he's treading water when it comes to the issues that really matter, which are COVID and the economy. So, yes, he's on thin ice, but at least he's got something to stand on there. Yeah, look, maybe he has no choice. Maybe he is in this position where he can, he'll never be able to go back to the kind of rhetoric he had before. And in some sense, he was never going to be able to, because he can't claim to be an outsider now. He can claim to be anti-establishment, but, he's replaced most of the establishment with his friends, so or family members. But, yeah, I think the Mount Rushmore speech was just a major example of how far he has come since 2016.
Yeah.
And where he has come to, I don't think is a politically useful place for him. I think it puts him right behind the 8 ball.
I do agree. Conservative media did love that speech. They really did, like you said, like in the Richard Lowry crew. They absolutely adored it. They made one call which I thought was actually fair enough, which was they were complaining that it was being spun as being about Confederates by the left, and they said it's not about Confederates, it's about founding fathers and all that kind of stuff. He didn't mention the Confederates. He didn't there was none of that.
Yeah, that came a couple of days later.
Yeah, which I thought that was a fair enough point from them. What wasn't at all a fair enough point from them was them saying, I can't believe the liberal media is calling it dark and divisive. It was so unifying. I go, huh? What? Sorry? What? Let me read you some quotes here. In our schools, our newsrooms, even our corporate boardrooms, there's a new far-left fascism that demands absolute allegiance. Make no mistake, this left-wing cultural revolution is designed to overthrow the American Revolution. This is why I'm deploying federal law enforcement to protect our monuments. But before the Americans declare again, as we did 244 years ago, that we will not be tyrannized, we will not be demeaned, we will not be intimidated by bad, evil people. I think calling half the populace bad, evil people might be divisive.
Yes. 2/3 of the population sympathises with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah. But anyway, but the thing which I found interesting about this is myself is that it seems to be they've really flicked the switch in the last 2 or 3 weeks to some extreme language, conservatives. Like this speech was an example of this, but it's only one example.
Right.
This week, I don't know if you saw Scott Adams. He's a Dilbert creator. Yes, he's considered to be this sort of super genius of the right. he just went nuts. He absolutely went nuts. He was tweeting out stuff like, if Biden is elected, there is a good chance you'll be dead within the year. Republicans will be hunted. The police will stand down.
Hunted.
It's just like he wasn't joking. He was dead serious.
The deadliest game of all.
Yeah, they are into full
Republicans.
Like back in 2016, it was a whole. This is flight. What's it called? Flight. Yeah. The article.
The United 93.
Yeah.
election.
There's Flight 93 all over again, where you got to rush the cockpit to save yourself. They've gone further. They're talking about being dead within a year.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and this is 4 months out, so there's a long way to go. Maybe like Biden's been ahead by 9 points for the last month. Maybe they think this is the last second.
Yes.
And so they're treating this like this is the week before the election.
Yes.
And if nothing happens, then they'll just give up and just become discouraged. I don't know, but just the rhetoric I'm finding a little bit problematic. I don't think it's going to win an election. I really don't think that wins an election. Not that Scott Adams matters.
Yeah, no.
But it's emblematic of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and potentially make the immediate aftermath of the election a lot uglier. So one of the things I was thinking of during this speech is with Trump now very awkwardly using the words cancel culture.
Yes.
And also, trying to frame everything, as he always has done, in terms of respecting the troops. Right. So, when Colin Kaepernick was doing his original kneeling protests, for Trump, that was disrespecting the troops, disrespecting the flag. Renaming military bases, that's disrespecting the troops. Okay, so combining these two themes of disrespecting the troops and cancel culture, we are talking about the president whose staff once ordered the name of the USS John McCain to be covered up in Japan so that Trump wouldn't see it.
That's cancelling.
Right? Yes. We're talking about someone who consistently denigrated John McCain. Now, there's a lot of things I didn't like about John McCain and his politics. But the fact is, as John McCain was staggering off the plane after serving 5 years in a POW camp in Vietnam, where he notably actually refused to be traded out early, as he could have done as an admiral's son. As he was getting off that plane, Donald Trump was in court defending his first ever civil rights violation lawsuit. Right?
He was fighting for all our freedoms.
Yeah. And, the cancellation of John McCain, in fact, the cancellation of a lot of people who were once mainstream right-wing figures in America, like Mitt Romney.
Yeah.
For example, the sort of erasure of them from conservatism because it has just been completely remolded around Trump. And now loyalty to Trump is the only benchmark of whether you're a genuine conservative. That cancel culture is more brutal than anything I've seen on the left.
Look, I would say, look, we're going to get to cancel culture. I would say times change in terms of people's opinions about things, and they move on, and people reassess their opinions about other people. I don't have a big issue with that, but I do think, there are many articles that have come out this week pointing out that Donald Trump himself is personally the king of cancel culture.
Yeah.
Like in terms of lawsuits designed to silence people. That is cancelling. He has, the fact that when Amazon, when the Washington Post bothered him, he tried to get Amazon punished.
Yes.
That is a cancellation.
Yes.
It's
he wants Australian style defamation laws.
Yeah. So he can destroy people.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So leaving aside Republicans per se, Donald Trump himself personally is more into cancelling than anyone else. As I said, there are a number of articles. If you in the comments on our Facebook page or on the YouTube clip, if you want me to put some links, I can, because I've got 1,000 notes as always. I've got like 3 examples of articles this week about that very thing.
Yes.
So I do think that is true.
But this is something worth noting. Cancelling at its most brutal is always either intra-left wing or intra-right wing.
Yeah,
nothing
matches. You can't cancel the other side. And I'll get to why when we talk about this in a second.
It's part of a more general phenomenon known as in-group policing.
Yeah.
And what's going on in the American right, it's just amazing over the last 10 years or so how people who were once absolutely mainstream to conservatism and now cancelled.
I would say this about this new rhetoric, which you were saying Trump isn't very effective at it. He doesn't even understand it. I would say that part of the problem is since this clearly isn't natural to him, or that he actually even believes it, really.
Yeah, no.
He's not consistent with it.
No, he's not.
And it makes it very, very difficult for him to prosecute the case, because even to the extent that he has a case, look, I could make a case. If I was Donald Trump and I wanted to do the cancel culture thing, I could make it so it was more attractive to the populace than he is doing at the moment.
Yes.
But he screws it up. Kayleigh McEnany does a much better job of this than he does. I'll get to a clip of her in a second. Because she at least understands what she's doing here. But what I was going to say is, like, I'll just note that there are some elements of this that he could argue if he was arguing effective. Because, the statue thing, we'll get to the Garden of Statues in a second. I know you want to talk about that. The only 17, according to YouGov, 17% of people support Washington, Jefferson, Jackson statues being taken down. That is not a popular thing to do.
No.
Now there is only a small proportion of the left who are trying to do that. Joe Biden isn't into that at all.
No.
So it's a hard argument for him to make, but he's not even trying to make that because he says it in a speech and then he just drops it and then he goes off to something else. Just similarly, there's the people on the right, the people who know what they're doing, the smart people on the right are trying to make a thing out of crime at the moment because the stats are there, right? This is off the back of defunding police type slogans and you usually whenever you have a situation where the police are under attack, you get this blue flu thing happening where the police don't turn up, they chuck a little tizzy. For some reason, the police can never be criticised, and they chuck tizzies whenever they're criticised.
Yes.
You're getting that happening right now. Police not turning up to work, crime rates are going up. Like the numbers that I saw this week, out of 25 large American cities, relative to the same period in 2019, murder is up 16.1% compared to last year. Murder's up 20 in 20 of those 25 cities. Interestingly, what they don't say, this is something you only hear on this podcast.
Only here on PEP.
Overall crime's down 5.3%.
Oh,
in those 25 cities. And violent crime's down 2%. But murder is up.
Right.
Property crime down down in 18 of the 25 cities. But murder is up.
So it's specifically murder.
It's specifically murder and shooting.
Is it because everyone's been sitting at home for so long just thinking, I'm going to kill that guy?
I've been dreaming about it for 3 months.
Yeah. See, no one's going to sit and go, I'm going to steal the shit out of that car, but
I'm going to graffiti that wall.
But wow, maybe just it's been incubating murderous thoughts.
Look, I don't know why. It's a really interesting question why this is happening, because if there's a Ferguson effect type thing happening, the Ferguson effect, for those who don't know, is that when the police get discouraged, they don't go as hard because they're worried about being prosecuted or whatever, and then crime flourishes. That's the theory of the Ferguson effect. If it was that, it'd be all crime. It wouldn't just be murder.
Yeah.
Like is it a COVID thing? Is it an unemployment thing? Is it a depression thing? I don't know. But whatever it is, it's weird that's going in one direction for some crime, but other directions for the other crime. Whatever it is, they could go hard on murder. They totally could. You could see Trump doing that. You could see him going real hard on murder. But what happens is he talks about crime, he talks about Washington or George Washington statues, and then he tweets out, has Bubba Wallace apologized to all those great NASCAR drivers and officials who came to his aid, stood by his side, and were willing to sacrifice everything for him, only to find out that the whole thing was just another hoax? That and flag decision has caused lowest ratings ever. So what he's doing
TV
there...
ratings, the only data that I think Trump actually looks at.
No, he doesn't, because NASCAR ratings are up by 21%. They're the only data that he pretends he looks at.
Oh my God.
But anyway.
I just assumed he's so obsessed with ratings that he actually looked at well.
No, you can never trust a number that comes out of Donald Trump's Twitter account. But anyway, so what he's doing there, for those who aren't been following it, is this Bubba Wallace guy is a very popular driver.
Yes.
Who's one of his staff found a garage pull in his garage that looked like a noose. If you've seen the photo, it looks 100% like a noose.
Yeah.
They then reported it to NASCAR,
yes,
who then looked into it themselves, found that was the only noose-like garage pull in the entire place. And in fact, there were almost none of them in the entire country.
Yes, that's right.
And then they told Bubba Wallace, here, look at this photo. This is a worry. Yeah. And Bubba Wallace said, oh my God, I don't like the look of that.
Yeah.
And then the drivers drivers marched on his behalf.
Yes.
Bubba Wallace at no point in time pushed this.
No.
It was NASCAR that was pushing it.
Yes, yeah.
But Trump's going, should the black guy apologize? He's the only black NASCAR driver, I should say, as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and Bubba Wallace is incredibly popular. No one blames him.
No.
He's been extremely dignified throughout. Lindsey Graham defended him, for Christ's sake. Right? That's when you know you've really gone astray. And when Trump does that, and by the way, that flag he mentions, the flag decisions, he's talking about
banning the Confederate
flag, which no one supports. Like, no one supports the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
Banning the Confederate flag from NASCAR.
Yeah.
No one supports that supports questioning that except for Trump. And you know what happened then? This is where I'm going with Kelly McEnany. What happened then was all anyone would talk about was, sorry, is he against the Confederate flag decision from NASCAR? Is he really against that? Because no one else is against that.
Well, there are people who are against it.
Well,
and Trump's theory is it's a larger block of the population
than the polls suggest.
Yes.
We went on about the Washington Redskins. Even Trump in 2013 tweeted out, "Presidents should not be telling the Washington Redskins to change the name. Our country has far bigger problems. Focus on them, not nonsense." Good advice, 2013 Trump. Anyway, so I want to just play a clip from Kelly McEnany from her press conference.
Finally, I'd end with this. I was asked probably 12 questions about the Confederate flag. This president's focused on action, and I'm a little dismayed that I didn't receive one question on the deaths that we got in this country this weekend. I didn't receive one question about New York City shootings doubling for the third straight week, and over the last 7 days, shootings skyrocket by 142%. Not one question. I didn't receive one question about 5 children who were killed, and I'll leave you with this remark by a dad. It broke my heart. A dad of an 8-year-old lost in Atlanta this weekend. They say Black Lives Matters. You killed a child. She didn't do nothing to nobody, was his quote. We need to be focused on securing our streets, making sure no lives are lost, because all Black lives matter. That of David Dorn and that of this 8-year-old girl.
So that's what Trump should be doing if he wants to argue this case. But he's not doing that. He's talking about the Confederate flags.
Yeah.
And then Kelly McEnany, by the way, she was right. 12 questions she got. 12 questions about the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
That's all anyone wants to talk about. And it's destroying what message he could get out.
By the way, I've noticed she and other Trump operatives, they've taken this sly new approach to Black Lives Matter. So they're no longer doing just the blatant all lives matter thing, which I think is widely recognized as a racist deflection. Instead, they're saying all Black Lives Matter.
Yes, yeah.
But it's the same kind of twisted tribal accounting. That's the way, when you say all Black Lives Matter, you're saying, hey, white audience, we all know that the real problem here is African Americans killing each other and African Americans having abortions. That's what that's saying. They are not even talking to black audiences. That is a sop to white audiences. In fact, most of the time, when it appears that Trump or his allies are talking to black audiences, they're not talking to black audiences, even if it's nominally addressed to black audiences.
They're talking to college-educated whites.
Yeah. Trump's 2016 speeches about American carnage, what else have you got to lose? There was a lot made about the fact that that was in Detroit. It was in a suburb of Detroit where it was estimated that about 5% of the audience was black, which is even lower than the percentage of the suburb that is black. So it's, it's an incredibly disingenuous rhetorical move that all Black Lives Matter.
And to be clear, I agree with you, but I'm just saying that if you want to run that play, that's how you run it. Yeah. But he's not even doing that.
No, he can't.
He's just all over the shop.
He can't.
It's and it just becomes ineffective.
Confederate flag, that means something to him, right? Symbol. A lot of my supporters like it. I'm going to go all in for it.
I want to get into cancel culture, but I don't want to leave before we refer to the Garden of Statues, which I know you're very keen to talk about.
The Garden of Statues.
So tell us about that.
So this is
an executive order.
It's as part of the pro statue stance that Trump is very big on.
Yeah.
He actually wants to create a new Garden of Statues somewhere, like the National Garden of Statuary.
Yeah.
In classic Trump fashion, it has been mandated that they have to be realistic depictions of the people. So none of this modernist
namby-pamby
garbage. Yes, and let's
None of those abstract statues you see all the time.
None of those abstract statues. So here's the list of people in the statue garden.
Right.
So John Adams, who was president.
Sure, why not?
Susan B. Anthony, major figure in the suffragette movement. Clara Barton, who was the founder of the Red Cross.
Yeah, she's nice.
Daniel Boone, who was a pioneer.
Daniel Boone. David Boone, he'd be good. Get him there.
Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. He was the college professor from Maine who led a regiment in the Civil War.
I know nothing
Gettysburg.
about him, but sure.
Henry Clay, he was a politician who was sort of the master of compromise in the 1830s, 40s, and 50s. Some of those compromises, though, were like allowing slavery to happen.
That's a compromise. That's very
Also wrote the
compromised.
book, The Education of Henry. No, I'm thinking
It's not going on the
else.
list. Let's not care.
Anyway, Davy Crockett, pioneer.
Davy
and
Crockett. He's just doing TV shows.
Tennessee politician.
The Dukes of Hazzard are coming up.
My favourite quote from Davy Crockett is, "You can go to hell, I'm going to Texas." Frederick Douglass, major, freed slave, African-American, philosophical
Here he's doing some great work.
figure. Yes, getting more and more recognition.
More recognition. That's a quote from Trump a few years ago. He thought he was still alive.
Yes. Amelia Earhart.
Yeah, sure. We all love her.
Yep.
Disappearing.
Just disappeared aviator. Benjamin Franklin, who's credited with all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
Billy Graham,
of course he's there.
great evangelist.
Yeah, this is. Is it me or does this sound a bit creepy? All these people in the one garden. It sounds like the garden from The Shining.
Well, So then we got Alexander Hamilton.
Okay.
I don't know if that's actually going to be a statue.
This is
of
Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yes.
It's okay. So this is basically a Noah's Ark for statues.
Yes.
Okay. So it's just old statues. No new statues. No Michelle Obama. These are old statues. Right,
Thomas
okay.
Jefferson, who's already got his own, monument in Washington.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Jr.
He's kind of new.
Abraham Lincoln. Douglas MacArthur.
Right, yeah, of course, Trump likes him.
Yes, Trump loves Douglas MacArthur.
Yeah.
Now, Dolly Madison, James Madison's wife, widely considered the first wife of a president who really played the first lady role
Okay.
and promoted by partisanship socially in Washington.
Got no problems with her. Are you sexist? Are you sexist, Dave?
James Madison, fourth president of the United States. Also one of the most important intellectual figures in the founding, author of the Federalist Papers, Constitution, had a lot to do with him. Now, okay, Krista McAuliffe. Does this ring any immediate bells for you?
No.
Yeah, I think this is the most obscure one.
No.
Krista McAuliffe, who I've got to admit I had to look up, was the teacher who went up in the Challenger that exploded.
Oh, I made lots of jokes about her when I was 7.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've got a major theme in this statuary garden of women lost in aviation.
Yeah, okay. I gotcha.
Which is an interesting theme. Audie Murphy, who was a very young war hero, 19 years old in 1945 when he performed all these
This does sound like a beautiful garden.
heroic
Dave.
feats. George Patton, another one of Trump's
Of
favourite
course.
military figures.
Yeah, military
absolute
figures from his
lunatic.
childhood. Yep.
Yes.
They're good.
Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Can I ask you a question, Dave?
Yeah.
Don't we have museums for this kind of thing?
Well, yes, we do.
That's right. So why do we need a garden of statues?
Because it's outdoors,
Sure.
obviously.
Yeah, sure. Get some air.
Okay.
Won't catch COVID.
Yeah. We're into the R's now. Jackie Robinson.
Okay, well,
pioneering African-American
everyone
baseball
likes
player,
him.
First one to play in the big leagues. Also a Republican, notably, although by the end he was incredibly pissed off with the direction the Republican Party had gone in.
Yep.
Betsy Ross, widely accredited with inventing the American flag, although I think the history is a lot more complicated than this.
These all have to be statues, right?
Yes.
I'm struggling with why it's important that they're statues. that's
Because they're statues. Because statues are under attack, Chaz.
okay, all right. Just checking.
Statues are under attack.
This seems to be more about an art form than about history to me. Because you could recognize these people in different ways. It doesn't have to be in a statue, but apparently it does.
I know, you could put them all in a novel together or something.
Anyway,
okay, this is the most controversial one, which is Antonin Scalia.
Of course he's there.
Literally, the only
Of course he's
legal
there.
figure that we're going to put in here is the guy whose death led to Trump's election, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to ignore, Oliver Wendell Holmes or any of the other great American jurists.
It's okay, I'm the law guy, not you.
Yeah.
That's all right.
I was going to say Kennesaw Mountain Landis.
Sure.
He was a judge, but he's most notable as the first commissioner of Major League Baseball. But, I think that's actually more deserving than some of these.
You know the statue I want to see in there?
Yeah.
I'll tell you a statue I want to see in there. I'm not sure if you saw that this week, but I know you still probably got more of that list to go. And you can finish off the list.
There's a little more, yes.
That's all right. But the statue I want to see is during the week, Trump's campaign, when they were going statue crazy, put out an ad that said, in caps, "We will protect this," and it was a statue of Christ the Redeemer from Rio de Janeiro.
Cristo Redentor. Yes.
I want to see Christ the Redeemer in the Garden of the Statues,
That would be
just towering over them all.
So much bigger than everyone else. Anyway, so we've also got Harriet Beecher Stowe, very significant early feminist and anti-slavery figure. Harriet Tubman, one of the major heroes of anti-slavery. Booker T. Washington. This is an interesting choice that basically hints at the underlying conservatism of the whole thing, because there were major debates going on between Booker T. Washington and other African-American intellectuals, especially W.E. Du Bois, about what needed to happen. Booker T. Washington was very much sort of accommodationist. George Washington, obviously, and both Orville and Wilbur Wright.
No.
So if you're a man and you went
actually.
up in the air in a really innovative way, you get to come back down and get in the statue garden. But to be a woman
You have to die.
who went up in the air, you had to die.
Well, look, it's a small price to pay to be in the Garden of Statues. That's so prestigious.
Yeah. I don't know if the idea is these statues will be like talking to each other.
Yeah, it's a really curious idea. I mean, doesn't this kind of undermine the whole thing about protecting all the statues out in the community? If there's going to be a garden of statues, let's knock them off. Who cares? There's a garden of statues. That's where the history will be preserved, in the garden. I don't know. It just seems to me not really well thought through.
Yeah. Anyway, just thinking back to what we were talking about at the start of the episode.
It's a long list to go. Yes.
60,000 COVID deaths a day.
That's right, yeah.
I don't think the election's going to be about statues.
No, I don't think so.
But that was a fun list.
It was a fun list. And I'll tell you what, to be fair, that is not the stupidest race-related thought bubble this week.
No.
That's the second stupidest race-related thought bubble. The stupidest race-related thought bubble. I was wondering how I was going to work this in, and now I've found how. Is Bill de Blasio painting Black Lives Matter outside on the road outside Trump Tower. What a dickhead. Really? He's just not even pretending to be anything but a troll. Literally directly outside Trump Tower painting Black Lives Matter on the road. Bill de Blasio, what a goose.
Well,
what?
I'm in favour of the act. I'm in favour of painting Black Lives Matter basically anywhere.
You can paint Black Lives Matter on the road. I don't have a problem with that. But to just be so explicit about trolling Trump. You could not get a better example of the people who criticizing Trump becoming Trump than that.
Bill de Blasio has also dropped the ball on just about every race-related issue imaginable.
Yeah, he has.
And, yellow paint is cheap, Bill de Blasio.
That's true. That is true. It doesn't matter, yellow paint.
I think I'd be a lot more in favour of it if Bill de Blasio hadn't been involved.
Sure. We can all agree on that.
Anyway.
Let's get on to cancel culture, because that's a whole area. Now, this is going to involve a bit of reading. I apologise in advance if you don't like hearing people read, but it's important to get the information out. Okay, first of all, I'm going to read the key part of the letter. This is a letter put together by a diverse range of signatories, largely from the left, but not exclusively from the left. A number of these people have had run-ins with let's say wokeness. They had run-ins with wokeness, but for different reasons. It's not all the same reasons. Some transgender, some race, whatever. Okay, this is the key part of the letter. The free exchange of information and ideas, the lifeblood of a liberal society, is daily becoming more constricted. While we have come to expect this on the radical right, censoriousness is also spreading more widely in our culture. An intolerance of opposing views, a vogue for public shaming and ostracism, and the tendency to dissolve complex policy issues in a blinding moral certainty. We uphold the value of robust and even caustic counter-speech from all quarters, but it's now all too common to hear calls for swift and severe retribution in response to perceived transgressions of speech and thought. More troubling still, institutional leaders in a spirit of panicked damage control are delivering hasty and disproportionate punishments instead of considered reforms. Editors are fired for running controversial pieces. They're obviously referring to the New York Times there. Books are withdrawn for alleged inauthenticity. They're talking about a youth romance novel which was about a particular black Indian tribe, I believe. Journalists are barred from writing on certain topics. Professors are investigated for quoting works of literature in class. That's someone who quoted the N-word in their class. A researcher is fired for circulating a peer-reviewed academic study. We'll come back to that one. And the heads of organisations are ousted for what are sometimes just clumsy mistakes. Whatever the arguments around each particular incident, the result has been to steadily narrow the boundaries of what can be said without the threat of reprisal. We are already paying the price in greater risk aversion amongst writers, artists and journalists who fear for their livelihoods if they depart from the consensus or even lack sufficient zeal in agreement. It goes on, but that's the key aspect. All right, so...
it's not a very concise piece of literature.
It's not, which is why I stopped short of reading the whole lot. But you get the idea. And look, we've all heard examples of this. There are... I just want to set the debate somewhat to begin with. I don't want to talk about J.K. Rowling, who for whatever reason has decided to spend the last few months just tweeting angrily at transgender people, and while they tweet back at her, and that... It's not a very constructive discussion, but she can take care of herself. The issue for... She signed this letter, by the way.
Yes.
The issue for... that I think where these writers are most interested, if I can read their mind.
Yes, yeah.
And where I think most people would say is much more of an issue is when it's a nobody.
Yes.
So for an example just from this week.
Yes.
The Boeing's communications chief resigned after an employee complained about an article he wrote nearly 33 years ago that said women should not serve in combat. He announced his resignation, saying he regretted what he wrote in the article, but it was published in 1987 when he was a 29-year-old Navy pilot.
God.
That guy has now lost his job because of that article written in 1987. That's the kind of thing we're talking about, where someone at some point in time had a black mark in hindsight, it gets dug up, and they go, you're fucked. Right, so that's what we're talking about. Well, I will frame it like that. You can talk about whatever you'd like, because now I'm going to throw it over to you. Do you think this is an issue or not?
Well, okay, so there's a few things that need to be clarified here. One is I absolutely agree with you. It's... when it happens to nobodies that it's the worst, because often there seem to be double standards that apply. Plenty of people, have all kinds of awful shit on the record and nothing ever happens to them. Yes, it's when it happens to the powerless. And, given how quickly things like language change and even how quickly things like acceptable ideas change, you don't want to be casting people out from society because they're not completely up to date with the latest shibboleths. And there's always a real danger that that can happen. I just think of how quickly a lot of terms that I use all the time, just the sort of accepted uses, accepted meanings around them has changed really, really rapidly. And certainly, punishing people who are by and large powerless, who aren't particularly trying to contribute to the discourse, that shouldn't happen. I think that one of the biggest criticisms that you can make of this cancel culture that the authors are talking about is the fact that so often the people that you would think of as the absolute worst offenders, the Donald Trumps of the world, they're not the ones who get punished.
No.
Right.
Yeah. If there's someone that should be cancelled, that is the guy, but he never will be.
Yes. Yeah. Australia's current Deputy Prime Minister, he had an article in a regional newspaper in 1991 decrying homosexuals because of the fact that they were bringing AIDS to Australia. Absolutely no consequences for him. No consequences for anything that Donald Trump's ever done. There are plenty of media figures who their whole career is basically, let's see what I can say that's going to cause as much outrage as possible. Then I can be the victim. So I think that one of the most important criticisms that you can make of this culture is, it basically that the hammer comes down hardest on people who don't have the political power to defend themselves.
Yeah, I suppose now I've got a bunch of disparate thoughts on this. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'll go in a bit. There's a few arguments that get thrown around. One is an argument that always gets thrown around when in this kind of stuff is they say, well, you want freedom of speech. People should have freedom of speech to respond to your freedom of speech. That's also freedom of speech, and that is true.
Yes.
Although what I would say is that in my view, there is a distinct difference between arguing with someone, criticizing someone, and explicitly trying to curtail their speech. And what I mean by that is by people explicitly calling for people to be sacked or for people to be punished for that, rather than saying what you just said is stupid for these reasons.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, to me, they are two completely different things. And I would never, under any circumstances, criticize someone for criticizing someone else's speech.
Yes.
But in particular, in the case of the powerless, I think it becomes bullying when you actually screw their life, which is what happens sometimes. Now people go, these people who sign this letter, they're all rich and famous. No one's cancelling them. That is true. I'm talking about not them.
Yeah.
So I'll just point it out.
Well, I would say Salman Rushdie, who was one of the signatories,
he
got cancelled pretty badly.
He got some treatment, has to be said. He got some treatment.
I've done a lot of research on him.
Kasparov got some treatment as well in Russia.
One day I will actually talk about the stuff that I uncovered in the British National Archives a couple of years ago about Rushdie that's only just been released. Yeah, he got cancelled pretty badly.
Another disparate thought I have off the kind of arguments get raised is people often at this point in time when we have this debate is they say, well, hang on. It's all right for you to have a general kind of chat about something that doesn't really matter, some intellectual concept. But we're talking about people who are saying pretty nasty things about my right to exist.
Yes.
We're talking about racists. We're talking about transphobes.
Yep.
We're talking about sexists and misogynists. And look, I get that as well. I totally get that.
Yes.
All I would say is that there is part of the problem, in my view, it's pretty clear where I'm coming from in this debate. But anyway, part of the problem I feel is that what is racism? What is transphobia? What is sexism? Because sometimes it's really obvious and sometimes it's not so obvious.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a really subjective call. And these things creep, I find, over time. And before long you're saying people are being treated exactly the same as someone who said something really, really racist, like really kind of I hate black people type stuff when they're talking about, like the classic example, which they referred to, I said I'd come back to it, was this guy, David Shaw. This is an example everyone brings up because it's the perfect example of, he tweeted out, he's a political scientist who tweeted out a study, which by the way, it doesn't really matter, but it was conducted by a black person. A study which suggested that violent protests are less successful than non-violent protests. Yes. And he tweeted this out during the Black Lives Matter marches, which were at times riots. And he's saying, basically, he didn't even make from memory, he didn't even say anything. He just said, here is the research, and just left it at that. But his implication was clear that you were better off, you'd be more successful if you weren't violent than if you are violent. And he lost his job because someone tweeted to his boss, get your boy. And they noted that and he apologized. He apologized for it. And
I'm actually not across the details of it. He actually lost his job.
He lost his job. He lost it after he apologized. He apologized for it and he lost his job anyway. And he hasn't said a word about it since because he had some kind of agreement, some kind of no disclosure. And also he wants to get hired by someone else.
Yeah.
But Jonathan Chait, who's a writer who's obsessed with this.
He is so obsessed.
Has just been going on and on and on about this guy's case, which I don't think this guy likes at all because it makes it makes him a hero for the cause he doesn't want to be a hero for.
Yeah.
But having said that, his example, David Shaw, that's a classic example of where this, you just go, what's going on here? Where that is not in any way racist, in my view, my personal subjective view, but he has basically been cancelled for racism because he cited a study that suggested Black Lives Matter protests would be more successful if they weren't violent.
Yes.
And that's that's
about the most egregious example.
Yeah. I think that's just about the worst.
Imagine,
but I cite that as an example of what is racist changes, and it creeps and it crawls, and it's subjective, and different people have different views. And so when you go, oh, we should be able to nail this person if they're racist, you go, okay, well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? That's just a reservation I have with a lot of this kind of stuff.
Right.
Which I just want to put out there. You've already mentioned the fact that this is applied inconsistently. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and nail someone while I'm defending people, but there is a person I can think of just this week who has been subjected to, who is known for being very bolshy on this kind of stuff, who has a skeleton in their closet as well, and they're going to get away with it. It's not going to be a problem for them because they're on the left, and it's not just on the left; they're part of the woke culture themselves, and people tend to be softer on those who are on their side than those who aren't on their side. And I don't just mean left, right. I mean part of their little subculture.
Yes. And I mean, this is also one of the problems with that letter, is that some of the people on there, like Barry Weiss, Barry Weiss, ever since she was an undergrad, has been trying to get people cancelled for supporting Palestine. Ever since she was an undergrad.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, Stephen Slater, who was this really famous, terrible example of someone who was given a job at the University of Illinois, but fired before he could actually even take the position up because of his pro-Palestinian stance. He was very bitter about this letter because she was on it, and also Kerry Nelson, who was one of the university figures who was against him, was on it. So I mean,
which is fair enough.
Yes,
hypocrisy abounds. It really does, and she's not the only person who I think is severely. In fact, I'm going to get into an example in a second about exactly that kind of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Which is what part of what makes this debate so problematic. Yeah. No one has clean hands.
No.
And whoever does have clean hands is probably the first to get nailed by it, to be honest.
Yeah.
because the people who fight hardest tend to win, unfortunately. But anyway, another example of the inconsistency. There's an inconsistency on what the issue of the week is. Like, for instance, the issue at the moment is clearly race. And there's a great example from just this week of the inconsistency where there's a guy, Drew Brees, who was a quarterback in the NFL.
For the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, he basically gave a cliched, it wasn't aggressive, but it was a pretty cliched why you shouldn't kneel type video, kneel for the flag, where he's going, it's about, I think of my. He wasn't being aggressive about it, but he was going, I can't help thinking about my family who are in the army and paying them respect and all that kind of stuff. Like, because you've heard the argument 50 times before.
Yeah.
But he made it, and man, he got nailed hard. His teammates were coming out recording videos against him. Like he gave what were like 3 or 4 just slobbering apologies. Like, it was clear that he was in real trouble, this guy, right? Then this week, this guy Deshaun Jackson tweets out. Did you see this one?
Oh, I did.
Yeah,
yes.
like he tweets out fake Hitler quotes, but he thought they were from Hitler, and he tweeted them anyway. He was saying, I got the quotes here, because the white Jews know the Negroes are the real children of Israel, and to keep America's secret, the Jews will blackmail America. They'll extort America. Their plan for world domination won't work if the Negroes know who they were. The white citizens of America will be terrified to know that all this time they've been mistreating, discriminating, and lynching the children of Israel. So that's fairly anti-Semitic.
That is incredibly anti-Semitic.
And that guy, look, he has apologized. He hasn't apologized like Drew Brees did. There's no slobbering apology, just kind of my bad. I probably shouldn't quote Hitler. He's not a nice guy. Like that kind of apology. And he's basically, like, there've been some criticism from the right, but he got so much less treatment than Drew Brees did. And what he did, in my view, was so much more overt than what Drew Brees did. But just Drew Brees happened to stumble on the issue of the day. No one cares about anti-Semitism right now. Yeah. It's not the issue of the day, so Deshaun Jackson gets away with it. It's the inconsistency that's kind of bothers me.
Yes, there is inconsistency. And I would say, though, political context is always inescapable.
Yeah, that's true.
Right, we're never going to be debating in this perfect liberal vacuum. And so there was this, there were some signatories to the letter basically wanted to get off it as soon as they saw who else was on it.
Yeah.
And so they immediately got pounced on like, ha! This is exactly the kind of hypocrisy. This is why you signed the letter in the first place, because of this kind of But I think it does change the equation when you see that Barry Weiss is on the letter. He's like, hang on a sec, I'm being used here. I'm being fucking trolled here. I've been recruited into something that I didn't know what the actual political purpose of this letter was, because anything that Barry Weiss has got her name on,
it's going to be used in a certain way.
It's going to be used in a certain way.
Yeah,
it's suspect. There
fair.
is no escaping that kind of political context.
That's fair. And also, I cited, remember there's a section I read, they referred obliquely to incidents, which people who signed that letter might not know what they were talking about.
No.
And they might not have liked being enlisted to defend those particular incidents if they knew what they were.
Yes.
So there is that as well.
There is that. And also, I just want to say, I've got a huge amount of admiration for a lot of people on that letter, and I think they signed it for exactly the right reasons. Sherry Berman is a great political scientist. Noam Chomsky. Someone did point out Noam Chomsky might be on there just because he's famously responsive to email.
He's just a nice guy.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy. I've had 2 honours students in the government department who've done interviews with Noam Chomsky basically just by emailing him. So
okay, Pep, here's your homework. Your homework is...
No, don't email Noam. He's got too much email to deal with.
Can some of you get Noam Chomsky to reply to you?
Please don't do this.
Okay, don't do it.
Yeah.
That's all right.
The guy's got a lot to deal with.
But if you do...
He's 92 years old
But if
now.
you do, be nice. But don't.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's, I've got a lot of, I think, most people signed it in good faith, but, there are these bits of political context that are inescapable.
Yeah.
Another inescapable bit of political context is the timing of it. This comes a month after journalists were assaulted, arrested, and shot at while covering police brutality protests by police who were doing the same thing to protesters who were protesting their brutality. I mean, it was fairly obvious at that moment that the biggest threat to freedom of speech in America didn't come from internecine, entertainment industry, and academic and journalistic struggles, which is essentially what the letter was about. Another important bit of political context is it's been the case for a very long time now that generally the biggest threat to freedom of speech is employers.
I'm getting to that.
Yeah.
But you make your point.
And, so there was another political scientist this week, Ryan Enos, he wrote an unnecessarily pompous tweet saying, I'm tenured at Harvard. I'm a Marxist Quaker, and even I feel the need to self-censor. So I can't imagine what it's like for, people outside of that culture. And it's like, yeah, damn right you can't imagine. Try working in retail and see how many times you self-censor every day.
Yeah, that's right.
In most jobs, people's freedom of speech is so curtailed that you don't even think about how curtailed it is. I mean, other than basically the floor of Parliament, academia and journalism actually have the strongest free speech norms of any workplace anywhere. And even though I think it is always important to be very, very vigilant about free speech issues, whenever I see academics and journalists complaining about their free speech being suppressed, I'm like, try any other workplace and see how much free speech you have.
That's an excellent point. And the point before about the threat to freedom of speech is not necessarily from left-wing cancel culture, I think is also a good point.
Yes.
Which I'm going to address more in a second.
Okay.
But I'm not going to address that one. That was just a good point. I'll just say good point, Dave.
Okay,
well,
thank you.
What I will say,
We're being very tolerant of each other.
we are.
Yeah.
What I will say, though, is that with you mentioned the floor of Parliament, this person may not give me permission to say this, but one of our upcoming guest podcasters, and I'll tell you when the day comes, I'll let them take credit for this idea if they want to take credit for it.
Yes.
Has a great idea. They've been talking about this for years, to create the defamation party. Run for parliament, and all they do is get up there and just basically take requests from people of things they want to be said in public, and they'll just get up there and just read out these defamatory, these awful things, just accuse people of being pedophiles, etc., and just put the clips up on Twitter. It's a brilliant idea.
You could definitely recruit Darren Hinch into this part.
Yes, but anyway, I just want to say, just something we flew past when you're talking about the hypocrisy of people. I just want to just give one example before I give my bigger example, which involves a little bit of reading, unfortunately, is J.K. Rowling. You cited someone, a transgender woman who took her name off the list immediately said, I didn't know I was going to be with these people. And pretty much she didn't say who she was talking about, but I think everyone knew she was talking about J.K. Rowling.
Yes.
Because J.K. Rowling has been having this thing about transgender people.
Yeah.
And as soon as J.K. Rowling's on that list, a bunch of transgender people said, oh God, this is just J.K. Rowling doing transgender again. J.K. Rowling certainly took it as her talking about J.K. Rowling, because then J.K. Rowling responded to her. I'll just read. I'm not saying the woman's name because she doesn't need any more attention. But I'm being nice to her there, not nasty. Like she clearly doesn't like the attention, this woman. So I'm not going to say who it is. But she said, I did not know who else had signed that letter. I thought I was endorsing a well-meaning, if vague, message against internet shaming. I did know Chomsky, Steinem, and Atwood were in, and I thought good company. The consequences are mine to bear. I'm so sorry. That's what this woman said.
Yes.
J.K. Rowling responded with, you're still following me, X. Be sure to publicly repent of your association with Goody Rowling before unfollowing and volunteer to operate the ducking stool next time as penance. And I'm going, okay, you know that this woman is scared of the backlash she's getting. That's why she's tweeted this. And you are just setting your mob on her as a result. You're making it twice as bad. You're making her a figure of hate. And it was completely unnecessary. Like if she was making a great point, that's fine. But it wasn't a great point. It was just being a bitch.
Yes.
It was just being nasty.
Yeah.
And I just thought, what are you doing? Like you were drunk on your own power there.
Absolutely.
Like it's just that's not helping. That's not helping freedom of speech.
No.
That's just bullying.
Yeah. By the way, I just remembered, while it's in my mind, one of the best books about cancel culture was written several years before the term got a lot of currency. But it was a big book at the time. John Ronson, So You've Been Publicly Shamed.
Yeah. Oh, it's
which
it's a good one. I've read
that
that
has
one.
some.
I've read one of your books.
Yes, the good the important thing about that book is it gets to what we were talking about earlier, where when the hammer comes down because of things that basically happen due to unfortunate timing, unfortunate wording. Where people might, deserve some sort of retribution because it's way out of hand, comes down on people who can't really defend themselves. So, on someone who works in PR and has 200 Twitter followers, which is one of the most notorious examples of this. The book is littered with examples like that. And, people are aware, even people who want to have, people generally being a lot more careful with their language and being called out for it. Everyone's aware of the way that this can get out of hand. Part of the problem with the Rowling thing is that's another example of, she is setting them up on, this is supposedly something that she's against.
Yeah. And she's using it. I'm going to get to a better example of that in a second. I want to just like I said, I've got a few different things to say here. Yeah. There is a different way of viewing this completely. And this is from someone who's, I wouldn't say in favor of an inverted commas cancel culture, but is from the different side of the debate than I am. Yes. But I think they make a great point. And I'm going to set some homework to read this person's article, especially if you agree with me that you're not comfortable with this. You should read this because I think this is a very sophisticated argument, which is to say, essentially what this debate is about two different kinds of freedoms clashing. There's freedom of speech on an individual basis versus freedom of association.
Is this Azweta Nehu's article?
In the New Republic. I think that's a brilliant article. And I was reading that and I was going, you know what? I'm not sure I agree with the net result, but logically,
Yes.
I think he makes a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and essentially, what you're talking about with inverted commas cancel culture is people just getting together who agree with each other, and that's a freedom. If you believe in freedoms, that's a freedom, and they should be allowed to do that. And it's about weighing which one has, because often those freedoms clash.
Yes, yeah.
Which one has preeminence in this particular case on a case by case basis? I think it's the freedom of speech people, and I'm one of them, have this tendency to think that is the only freedom.
Yes.
But it's not. It's just not.
Yes, you do.
And so anyway,
Go and cancel yourself.
I think that's interesting. I think it's well worth considering if you want to be slightly subtle and nuanced about this debate.
Yes.
Okay. I want to. Now I'm going to go into some of the things I've flagged that I would get into, which is, first of all, cancel culture. I think I don't really like the phrase, but just to sum it up. I do think it exists, but I don't think it's nearly as consuming and powerful as people suggest it is.
No.
And I want to give you some examples, and this comes into your employer thing.
Yes.
Sue Schaefer is a great example everyone makes, which is a woman who attended a Washington Post Halloween party 2 years ago, dressed as Megyn Kelly, who at that point in time was in the middle of a blackface scandal. She went in blackface with a sign saying, "Hi, I'm Megyn Kelly," right? Like, I don't think it's the world's greatest joke, but it's obvious what she was doing there, right? She's a complete nobody. She's an accountant, okay? But it was the Washington Post Halloween party. Two of the people who turned up there there was a black woman and a Latino woman, got very offended.
Yeah.
They had a go at her, which is fair enough. If you like freedom of speech, they had a go at her. She ran away crying. They ran away crying. No one was happy with this scenario.
No.
2 years later, one of the Latino woman follows up, trying to find out who this person is. She then asked the person who threw the party, who is Tom, whatever his name is, Toledo, whatever his name is, Tom something, the cartoonist at the Washington Post. He said, "I have no idea who it is," even though he did know who it was. He was just trying to save her. Word gets around to the Washington Post that this woman is asking about this person. They find out who it is. They then run this huge piece about this woman, who then gets fired because of the piece. This accountant, she gets fired for something that happened 2 years ago, and it was dealt with then. They were all crying and yelling at each other then, right? Anyway, so that's one example people cite.
Yeah, okay, though. Another lesson from this, never do ironic racism.
Oh, definitely do not do that.
Especially not ironic blackface.
Definitely don't do that. Second example people cite is a Latino electrician who was making an okay sign like this out of his car.
Yeah.
His hand was coming and he got fired. That guy on Twitter, he got fired, this electrician. Third example people cite is David Shaw, which we've already talked about.
Yeah.
They're the three examples that people are talking about a lot at the moment as being pathetic examples. All of them have one thing in common. No one had any power to get them sacked apart from their boss.
Yeah.
Their bosses caved in for bizarre reasons. Like, in all three examples, there was no massive movement of people going, "You must sack this person, you must sack this person." None. In fact, no one was saying that.
Yeah.
In any of those examples, in all three examples, the bosses just jumped with this knee-jerk reaction to controversy, going, the only solution is sacking. And so, to me, that's the issue. It's not the issue is not about people criticizing you. The issue is that for some reason, the companies are so shy of any kind of negative publicity that when one of their employees is criticized, they must immediately be sacked.
Right, yes.
And I think that's the issue. And the solution is for them to stop sacking people unless there's a big movement of people asking them to be sacked, and then there's got to be a good reason.
Yeah, and it does raise a bigger point about the damage that this kind of thing can do to progressive politics, because it allows it to be co-opted by corporate interests to domesticate it and tame it and trivialize it as much as possible, and actually to move the whole grounds to debate to areas that non-marginalized people are far more comfortable with. So, I mean, let's not forget what kicked off all of this year. It was a guy getting killed by a cop in Minneapolis. It wasn't about statues. It wasn't about Gone with the Wind. It wasn't about academics tweeting studies, but that is where the attention has subsequently gone. there have been really just creepy ways in which corporate interests have co-opted Black Lives Matter. Like, it turns out it's incredibly cheap to, tweet out something in favor of Black Lives Matter. I think every brand, every brand mascot now realizes that, that Black Lives Matter. And yes, sort of, as you say, these sort of knee-jerk responses, which often do involve serious violations of workers' rights. It really does, in some sense, kind of neoliberalize the whole thing by making it purely in terms of individual responsibility. Right. And I certainly believe racism in particular is not purely about individual responsibility.
Although there might be some particular examples, sure, but the ones we're talking about.
Yeah, but the whole, like, hey, we fired that person who did ironic blackface. We're, therefore, racism, problem solved. And our corporation that, is engaged in God knows what manner of abuses in various countries around the world. I mean, this, Washington Post, its parent company is not exactly known for its kindness.
No, it's not.
To people. So there is there's a real possibility that this actually allows basically companies to change the subject to, I hate the term virtue signal, but that's basically what it is, in ways that are completely non-meaningful and allow them to dodge the real issues.
The next area here, which I want to pick up on from what you said before, is the fact this is not new. This is far from new. In fact, I'm going to set some more homework.
Yeah.
I've got an article from George Orwell, which was in the introduction to Animal Farm, where he talked about this issue in the 40s. I've got a quote for you. The chief danger to freedom of thought and speech at this moment is not the direct interference of the Ministry of Information, which existed back then, by the way, or any official body. If publishers and editors exert themselves to keep certain topics out of print, it's not because they're frightened of prosecution, but because they're frightened of public opinion. In this country, intellectual cowardice is the worst enemy a writer or journalist has to face, and that fact does not seem to me to have had the discussion it deserves. That was in the 40s. By the way, what he was talking about there was criticising Stalin, which goes to show why it is good to have speech about this kind of stuff, because then they were scared of criticising Stalin. But anyway, this exists in the 40s, and look, and myself, I've got some experience of this myself. This was not invented a couple of years ago. 10 years ago, we had a sketch, the Make-A-Wish Foundation. All right. Where to be honest, I still think it's a funny sketch, but we probably didn't write it as carefully as we could have. There's a line or two which we could have changed. My dad always said the last line was the one that tipped people over the edge. Anyway, doesn't matter. The point is,
I'm sure you can still find this on YouTube.
You definitely can. Yeah. Whether you approve of it or not, the line was, if you're curious, I won't make you. It was why give them a present when they're just going to die anyway? Something like that. Talking about kids who have cancer. Anyway, whether you like it or not, that's not really the issue. The issue was there was a real move to cancel us as a result of that sketch, right? A real move, and it wasn't by Twitter, it wasn't by woke people, it was by Talkback Radio and by the newspaper. And I promise you, as scary as you think Twitter is, wait till you get Talkback Radio on your ass. All right, that's really scary. And I'll tell you a quick story just to put it in context for you guys, okay? Yes. We were trying to do a stunt. For Christ's sake, we were still trying to make the TV show at that point in time while this was blowing up. And we're out in the community and we get a text from someone, me and Andrew in the car, we get a text from someone saying, turn on 2GB. So we turn on 2GB. What's going on? And it's Ray Hadley. And it's Chris Smith. It's Chris Smith, who, by the way, at this point in time had been sacked repeatedly for sexual harassment.
Yeah.
But anyway.
And he doesn't even have any rugby league credibility.
Yeah. So Chris Smith is on doing Talkback Radio, and he is calling for our address on air. This is what he's doing on air. Let's find out where they live. I don't know if he had any intention of broadcasting it or just finding off air where we live. Yeah. But this is a quote. I am never going to forget this quote. let's do to them what they're doing to this country.
Wow.
And I don't think what he had in mind was performing a nice little comedy sketch.
No. I don't think that's,
Yeah, and it was scary as all hell. And by the way, me and Andrew had, because this is the way we think, we just immediately thought to ourselves, oh, should we call him up and give him Ray Hadley's address and say it's Chris's address?
Yes, you should have.
But we thought, the ABC, they're already this close to axing us. That would be an unwise decision. And I think in hindsight, it was a good call to not do that. It's scary. It's having been part of it. It is really scary. And I'll tell you something else which you might not realize, that people, and people go, oh, poor baby, you got a few negative tweets. You wait till you get it yourself, because 10 negative tweets feels like 100. 100 negative tweets feels like 10,000. You feel like the entire world wants you dead. You really do. And when it's talkback radio and newspapers, it's even worse, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, this is not new. This has been around forever. And in my view, it's actually a lot more gentle now than it was back then.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think of the way Yasmin Abdel-Magid was forced out of the country.
Yeah, that's
for
right.
a 6-word tweet.
Let's not forget, 30 or 40 years ago, you were literally not allowed to say certain things.
Yes.
Like, not allowed.
Yeah.
Remember, Orwell was talking about the Ministry of fucking Information.
Yes,
They had to submit stuff to the Ministry of Information for permission to publish. So, so suggesting that this is some historic thing, no, there's always been cancelling. There's always been, doesn't mean I think it's good. I hate it. But let's just keep some historical context before we start wetting our nappies about this kind of stuff. That's all I'm saying on this, okay? Now, the case study I want to give you before we move off this is I want to talk about Jesse Singal and Emily Vanderhoff, because this, to me, sums up the real issue here, which is the mobs. Right? Emily Vanderhoff is a writer for Vox. She's transgender, right? She's transitioned from male to female, okay? And Matt Iglesias is a writer in Vox as well. He's a bit of a contrarian. Vox is a very woke publication, but Matt Iglesias is more kind of a debating school style writer. He likes to argue contrarian lines. So you can see how he'd be into this letter, because this is the kind of thing he likes to do. He signed the letter, all right? Emily Vanderhoff, she wrote a public letter. She said, I sent a version of this to the editors of Vox. I've redacted some bits that are internal to Vox and shouldn't be aired publicly. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It goes for a while. But essentially, she said that Matt writing this, Matt's tweets and his signature to a letter like this do make my job slightly more difficult, as would-be readers and sources too often equate my positions with his. After all, he remains one of our most prominent staffers. She also said it makes her feel less safe, which a lot of people...
Yeah.
They jumped onto that and they said, oh, hang on, you're trying to get him sacked. When you start saying they make you feel less safe, that's trying to get someone sacked. But she did explicitly say, I don't want Matt to be reprimanded or fired or even asked to submit an apology. Doing any of the above would only solidify in his own mind the idea that he's been martyred for his beliefs. But I do want to make clear that those beliefs cost him nothing. They are not particularly risky. They're not particularly sound. Even I am used to hearing them from people who believe my own lived experience pale in comparison to their own momentary social media discomfort. I'm sorry to find Matt amongst those voices. So it was a considered message, which I disagree with, and I don't think she should have used the word safe either myself, but it was considered. It was not pitchfork stuff, right? Okay. So in response to that, Jesse Singal, who is really into this stuff, Jesse Singal wrote he captured that tweet, and he said, Matt Iglesias has been reported to his employer by a colleague for signing an open letter which argues the climate of conformity, fear, and mutual surveillance have descended upon public intellectual life. He's noting the irony of this, right? That wasn't very aggressive either. He made a fair point, I feel, but at the same time, what happens when she writes her letter? What happens when he does his response? This is what happens. 3 days later, Emily writes this. The following is the last thing I will say on this on Twitter. These 2 days have been hell. Death threats, rape threats, invitations to commit suicide, constant misgendering, etc. on every platform. The only way I can avoid it is to leave the internet entirely. I can't sleep. To my knowledge, not one signatory of the Harper's letter has said anything against this behaviour, despite how obvious, extreme and public it's been. At least 2 have egged it on or incited it. They do not believe in free speech. They believe in free speech for them. Note again, the only way I can avoid this is to leave the internet entirely. Considering I make my living writing for the internet, this is an actual genuine attempt at cancelling someone. It won't work, but that's its aim. I have my employees' support in weathering a storm, I've been given space to decouple for a few days to preserve brain space. Many, many people would not be so lucky. The hypocrisy of celebrating so-called vigorous debate only to call out those who offer a counter-opinion for offering such a counter-opinion is obvious on its face, but I'll point out anyway. They do not believe in free speech. They believe in free speech for them. Right-wing blogs like Daily Caller and Breitbart have written pieces calling for my firing, using YouTube screen caps of me, designed to make me look unattractive or masculine. Their readers swarm me. They do not believe in free speech. They believe in free speech for them. I've had friends who have been through this sort of online hate mob before, and they talk about like a natural disaster. It strikes and it leaves you standing in rubble, wondering where your life went. I believed them. I didn't understand them. Now I do understand them. And I wouldn't wish what I'm going through on my worst enemy. I agree with that, by the way. Trust me, you don't want to be through this. It is despicable, dehumanizing, emptying. I have nothing left. The irony is their claim is that I was trying to incite a hateful mob against my colleague in the name of getting him fired, despite my constant protestations to the contrary. To my knowledge, no such hateful mob against him materialized. Yet one materialized against me. A hateful mob descended on me as soon as Jesse Singal, who signed the letter, began tweeting about my supposed ulterior motives. I've been contacted by a number of journalists who are treating this as a curious matter of Vox's office politics, perhaps because this is not about my job. This is about my fucking life. I'm going to try to sleep some more. I'm going away from the internet to read a book, go outside, whatever. Yeah. So anyway, that's what she said. So
yeah.
And then Jesse responds with, the Vox writer I criticise is getting really bad harassment because this is how online bullshit works. Within about 30 seconds of things really kicking off, she'd likely received what any decent person would describe as wildly disproportionate punishment for whatever she did. I do not think journalists should be immune from people asking them online to defend their writing or their tweeting. But threats and slurs and the like are a whole other level and they're completely unacceptable. If anyone replies to this with a link to a follower of mine harassing her, I'll block them. Simple as that. One part of this is complicated. If X thinks Y did something outrageous, how can X highlight that without Y coming in with a wave of harassment? I don't know the answer to that. I do know that on an individual level, harassing people is totally unacceptable. Do not be an asshole, even if you can't empathise with her, and of course you should, because she's a human and what she's going through sucks. This does not even further your own goal because it turns everything into an internet harassment story. Just don't harass people. Now, what do we do? Because he's right. Jesse's goes that saying. Jesse Singal then faced a torrent of people going, fuck you die, Jesse Singal, etc. You're horrible. What do we do? Because you can't, neither of these people were that aggressive on the other one.
Yeah.
But their mob comes with them and their mob is not nuanced and their mob is not nice and their mob wants the other side destroyed all the fucking time. So what do we do?
I've got no idea.
Yeah. it's a tough, like, I personally would like to see Twitter have a comment-free function.
Right.
I know at the moment you can do comment-free on your particular tweet.
Yeah.
But I would like to see a comment-free for a person. I would like to see when this happens, Twitter, like a person can at the very least, tell Twitter, can you switch off all comments directed at me? I don't mean mute them.
Yeah.
I mean make people unable to, so people can tweet Emily Vanderwolf, but they can't tweet at Emily Vanderwolf. It doesn't compute.
Right.
So there's no way it ever gets back to her. If she wants to search her name, she can.
Yeah.
But I don't see how it is constructive in any way, shape, or form, or helping freedom of speech or anything to allow people the chance to get in your head when you just can't deal with it.
Yeah.
It's to me, it's always bullying. It's always awful. It helps no one.
Yeah.
It's just but anyways, it's just that to me is the biggest issue with all of this.
Yes.
The fucking mobs.
Yeah.
That is the problem. It's and they're on all sides. It's not left or whatever. Everyone who has any followers has a mob because these people all think that what they have to say is so valuable, and it's just 90% of the time it's adding absolutely nothing but just headaches and abuse.
Yeah.
It's just, even when it's trying to be nice, it still adds headaches.
I mean, and this raises the question of why was this open letter written and published in the first place?
Look,
it was never going to do anything other than have this kind of effect. I mean, they weren't, this was standard liberalism that they were throwing out there.
I know.
The way it was done, it was always going to have this effect. It has been pointed out, a lot of the signatories to the letter intellectual luminaries who have no idea of how internet culture works. And then some of the other signatories were people who know exactly how internet culture works.
I was also talking about why did Emily Vanderwolf write her original letter and place and put it on the internet, because that was going nowhere good when she tweeted that as well. But which is actually if you follow me on Twitter, you would know I never express an opinion about anything. Because
Really?
yeah, I don't. Have a look. I never express opinions. I just tweet out links, occasionally tweet out a joke, but basically I never tweet out an opinion.
Joke is an opinion.
No. They're silly jokes. I've been on Twitter for 10 years.
Yeah.
I've literally never tweeted out a serious opinion.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I bombard my poor followers with my opinions all the time. It's like 17 opinions before breakfast.
And the reason for that is because I just think Twitter is a poor forum for opinions.
It is.
And so yeah, it's I should also say Twitter is only one world. Like the Jesse Singles of this world feel they have to win Twitter, right?
Yes.
Because they just go and I just think, you know what? Let the woke people have their corner of Twitter. Out in the real world, transgender people don't have a lot of power.
Yeah.
They really don't.
No.
But they may have power in woke world in Twitter, but that's just one small. It's not even Twitter isn't even one world in itself. There's different parts of Twitter. You're talking about the media woke part of Twitter.
Yes.
Where woke rules, no doubt woke rules. But so what? Let it rule. Like I'm not into that. But then I go to a different part of Twitter. And if I don't like it, I don't go to Twitter at all. I go to some other social media, or I talk to the person next door. You know, you know what I mean? Like I feel like there are some people who just won't concede. They always have to win out in any particular area. And you just go, no, just like if you're fucking up everyone, just concede. Just for this bit. Not complete. Just how about that? How about that?
Yes.
What do you reckon, Dr. Dave?
We're almost at the end of the podcast.
Oh shit! I know.
That conversation went on for a very long time.
I know.
I do want to
That's a good one.
throw in one more bit of historical context,
all right.
which is
Haven't even talked about Kanye yet. Next week.
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Next week, because no doubt he will have given us a lot more ammunition by next week.
I've got a guest on Wednesday, by the way, so 2 podcasts next week.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is often sort of referred to as, it's just the most recent manifestation of Puritanism. Right. And I always find this quite interesting when you really look at who the Puritans were. So people have been making fun of Puritans for literally centuries. Right. So Shakespeare made fun of them. Okay. In the play Twelfth Night, I think it's Malvolio, is this Puritan who is relentlessly and cruelly made fun of. And, even when Puritans were the dominant culture in the United States, there were still people who made fun of them. Puritanism is quite an important part of America's overall sort of historical religious fabric. And, I mean, the term Puritanism in itself is a slur. It means someone who can't stand anyone else having any form of pleasure. Like, Puritanism literally means against pleasure. But I think that when, there's a deeper point here about, okay, one tenet of Puritanism, or Calvinism from which Puritanism comes, is the idea that there's really no division between the public and the private. That who you are outwardly reflects who you are inwardly.
Yeah.
Right. And that's going to be judged. That's going to be judged by God. Now, I've got to say, I've got some sympathy with the view that if your public persona is being an asshole, then you're an asshole.
Yeah.
Right. I get very, very sick of hearing about, X, who's, one of the most notorious assholes in the media, is actually a really nice guy in person. Like, no, he's not.
Yeah.
No, he's an asshole. The fact that people are nice, probably instrumentally, to people who are close to them, that doesn't make them any less of an asshole. Also, it's very easy to bag Puritans. Like, they're just against anyone having any kind of fun at all. But you know what Malvolio got mocked for in Twelfth Night? The fact that he was against bear baiting. Right, the Puritans have been on the right side of certain issues
Sure.
over the years.
Let's give him props.
Yeah. And I suppose, okay, so that gets to the final point, which is the fundamental ambiguity of everything, right? And there is just too much of a tendency to believe that everyone else is always acting in bad faith. Now, that would be less of a problem if there weren't so many people constantly acting in in bad faith. But everyone does need to chill the fuck out a bit.
Thank you, Dave. That's a good note to go out on.
Yes.
We have Kanye coming up on Wednesday. We have the Supreme Court, which we still haven't finished. Oh, my God. And I'll let you on a little secret. For the last month, I've been wanting to talk about weapon sales. I'm going to work that in.
Okay.
So these are all things you can look forward to on Wednesday or Friday, because I'm sure we'll run out of time on Wednesday with my guest podcaster.
I'm really looking forward to this
Who might
guest.
that be? We'll
Who
find
could it
out.
be?
Ooh. See you guys then. Thank you very much. Bye.